Last year, we titled my presentation as A Second Hill for Remote Viewers. And that's probably one of the better titles for what we're doing, as we are not in any way in conflict with the CRV techniques or any of the other recognized techniques. It's just that where I came in was in a different page. And so I learned it very early. And at that time, Stanford hadn't really gotten off the ground with their program. So their techniques were unknown. They were developed as they were going. And where I learned it was from the Russian techniques, which were at that time approximately 30 years in the learning process, and was able to get my hands on, through a source at the RAND Corporation, some of the translated works of 4 of the major Russian researchers. And I will not say the translations were good, but they were at least readable. I'm a journalist by trade. That's what I do. And the remote viewing has become an overriding preoccupation in my life. I'm still a journalist. I do write about these things and other things, antiques. What journalists are that way. You write about what somebody is willing to pay you to write about. But the remote viewing has become a very large part of my life since 1961. And that's where we're going to start most of this story. Okay. Russian training programs were developed to develop psi abilities. This was a step forward, because as we all know, it was formerly thought, including by Dr. Joseph Ryan himself, that this was something you were either born with or you weren't. Now, what has been actually proven is that we are all born with some amount of this ability, but it takes solid training to be able to direct, control, and to use it properly. So that is the difference. The Russians, being non-mystical, decided that if ESP existed at all, they wanted to know what it would do, what it could do. So they set forth to learn exactly where you could go with this ability. They could not find enough people to test. Not too hard to explain. If people have an ability and the government's looking for them, they would want to conceal that ability, wouldn't they? So they ended up training college students who were already in a learning atmosphere. And they began to train them to use and to develop psi abilities. And this program, when I heard about it, intrigued me to the point where I did all I could to get access to the training materials that they were using. Okay, an extension of the natural senses. Now, you are all familiar with the words ESP, and they call it extrasensory perception. We prefer to refer to it as extended sensory perception, because when you're beginning to learn to remote view, you're extending far beyond the 5 senses that you use every day. Some of the early work in training, in actually developing habit patterns, habituations in the human personality, were done by Pavlov in the dog experiments, where they would train dogs to respond to the ring of a bell. When the bell was rung, the dogs knew they were going to be fed. So before long, all you had to do was ring the bell, and the dogs would begin to drool because they were expecting to be fed. Training a habit pattern into the mind, whether it's remote viewing or any other, is just done the same way. You ask this of your mind, and it follows through. Okay, energies. What are the energies? No one actually knows yet. This is one of the unanswered questions. I think Lynn and Paul and Mel and everybody else in the field, including Russell Targ and all the scientists studying this, will tell you that we know there's some kind of an energy involved with this, but no one knows what it is. Now, the Russians were interested in the energies behind these effects, and some of the work that they did was with the human biosphere. This is an actual photograph taken by Semyon Kurlian in Russia, and it shows the energy discharge from a single human figure taken by a Kurlian camera. Today's Kurlian cameras that you run into at psychic fairs are not worth the nickel they cost you, because the technique is totally different. But these are actual photographs of some kind of unknown energy that were developed in Russia. What they discovered was that every solid object has energy. Every tree, every rock, whatever is solid has an energy associated with it. And it's feelable. They called it a biosphere. They first thought that only plants and humans had this kind of energy. But it was found that everything that is solid, that is composed of atomic molecules, neutrons, neutrinos, quarks, whatever, has an energy field. So it's no longer a biofield, but it is an energy. This is an early picture of a leaf's energy, just one leaf from a tree. This is a tiny piece cut from the leaf. Look at the immense amount of discharge from that little piece. The leaf is dying and releasing energy. This is a time exposure, 3 frames. As the leaf begins to die, what occurs? So this energy is photographable, it is feelable, but we still have no idea what it is. But the mind can control some forms of this energy. Do Kurlian photos actually photograph life energy? We don't know, but it's a beginning. We have to start somewhere. This is an ordinary silver dime, and it gives off energy like that. Would you say it was alive? Probably not. But in the atomic sense, certainly it is. That's out of focus.
Would you say that's an instance where it actually has a consciousness of its own and it's the manifest energy of it?
Perhaps. But the atomic structure is moving, living, whirling all the time, and it gives off energy. And this is one reason we work with objects in our beginning training, because we can use the energy of that object to begin the remote view. There are hundreds of types of energy which are invisible to the human eye. Have you ever seen a radio wave? Have you ever seen a television wave? No, of course not. These things have to be picked up by sensitive instruments. But the human body contains the same sensitive instruments that are used to pick up radio waves or television waves, and part of this technology that's built into the human brain is used in the process of remote viewing. Ongoing research programs in universities all over the world are still trying to figure out what these energies are, how they can be controlled, modified, changed. Even studies into the death and the dying process have been initiated in the same way. What happens when you die? Energy leaves. What kind of energy is that? Where does it go? So there are many, many unanswered questions. This ability that we're dealing with, that you're here to learn about this weekend, is as natural as breathing. But it cannot be controlled without proper training. And that's what we represent, training. Somebody's in front of the electric eye again. Stonehenge, does it have energies? Of course it does. It's formed of energy. Why is it? Because it's constructed. It's got stone, it's got earth. It has an energy field that is peculiar and distinct to itself. Now, how does that fit into our paradigm? An object that is taken from a place like Stonehenge will retain the energy of the place from which it was taken, perhaps forever. But we have taken stones from places like this for the last 30 years and not found that even after 30 years of using them, that it loses anything. A student could be given a piece of stone taken from here, and they would be able to see in their mind's eye Stonehenge, because it retains the energy of where it was. This is one of the places that the Russians began, color. Color has a feel, it has a texture, it's either hot or cold. We have a set of color cards that will teach you how to do that by feeling, and also it has a texture, an actual texture. Things that have color can be smooth, slick, rocky, gritty, dry. They can retard your fingertip or it can slide across easily. You have to work with this. This is a student illustrating the Russian push technique. He's pushing his fingertips across that color to feel what the differences are between the four of those. This develops more sensitivity in the mind to energies and usages that we haven't been accustomed to using. You pit your mind against an unknown in this work, whether it's a target such as Lynn uses or whether it's a target such as we construct. The target is a known object, but the information about it is unknown, and this is what we are working to get, as much information as possible about the item itself. This student is working on life-death. Photographs of people who are alive tend to be cold. Photographs of people who are, dead people tend to be cold. People who are alive, there's a strong warm vibration. So there's a difference in how they feel. And she's learning to determine whether the people on those photographs are alive or dead. Any object can be used for this work. Many people have referred to my training classes as rock school because we tend to use rocks. One reason is it's easier to get somebody to bring you a rock from Stonehenge or a rock from the United States Capitol or Niagara Falls than it is any other item. And as long as that item is taken from the place that it is native to and not brought in by a truck, it will retain the impression of the place from where it was taken for as long as as far as we know, over 30 years. There are many areas of the brain involved in this equation. Not all of them are known, but we recognize at least three: the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and something that's a little higher, which we like to call the superconscious. And it comes into play when we're using remote viewing. The conscious mind sets the questions. It tells you where you're going. The superconscious sends the answer back to the conscious mind. We believe that the superconscious, if there is one, and we believe that there is, has the ability to get any information in the world, the answer to any question that you could ask, past, present, or future. Yes?
Are these in the book that you wrote?
Yes. Yes, they're in all of my basic books. Every person without exception can learn to do the basic psychometry is the basic. We call it hard target remote viewing. Psychometry is the professional use name that they developed years ago, but we've taken it many layers beyond that. A simple stone can hold a record of almost anything, where it was from, what happened there, seismic events, anything that ever happened there. We have a set of rocks that were taken from behind the grassy knoll in Dallas, Texas, and you would be surprised what answers students get when they hold those. And they have no idea whether they came from Dallas or the moon. The stone is held in the left hand because if you're right-handed, your left hand is going to be more sensitive to these energies. We don't know why that is. It's like the human body is magnetic in a way. Like a magnet, you have a sensitive hand and a non-sensitive hand. So we use the sensitive hand. Right-handed people, that's the left. That stone could tell you that it came from this place, which indeed it did. So when you hold the stone, you don't see the stone. You see the place from which it was taken. Students in training classes such as ours can get accurate results on the first day. At the 99 remote viewing conference, we had a very skeptical reporter from Popular Science magazine, and he didn't believe any of this stuff. until he listened to some of the lectures. And that evening, he made the mistake of sitting down next to me, and I handed him a little bag with a teaspoonful of mud in it, and he said, "I can't do this stuff. You guys do this stuff." And I said, "Just tell me where this bag of mud comes from." And he ended up describing perfectly a civilization with pyramids, houses, natives, very primitive. He went back 1,000 years and perfectly described Cahokia Mounds, Illinois, because that's from where the little teaspoonful of mud was taken. Most of the psychic skills can be learned in a few hours. Learning and beginning a process, it's so you can pick up a tennis racket and hit a ball with it, right? But when it's remote viewing, it's going to take you some time. Once you begin the programming, then you can take it a step further and a step further. And that's when you want to come to one of the professionals in the training field, like Lynn or Paul, and learn how to develop the ability to control it. Because otherwise it might only operate when the moon is full. That's George. He's one of our training function people. That skull will tell you who wore it, what he was like, what he did, how he died. All you have to do is touch it. You want me to bring George to meetings sometime? To be useful, this has to operate at command. And so our command system is rather basic. We use the same questions that police detectives are trained with: who, when, how, where, what, and why. And once you learn those questions, there is no answer that you cannot get. You do not have to go into a trance. You do not have to wear a robe. Please don't. It's all right if you take off your shoes, but don't ever get it caught in the idea that you have to go into some altered state of consciousness. I believe the brainwave studies done here last year showed that people in a totally conscious state are able to do remote viewing. In the case of the people from our squad that were brainwave scans were done, they showed a preponderance of the delta wave, which is associated with a dream state. But these people were wide awake, totally. This is a squad meeting. This is what our group does. We get together, and as you can see, everybody there is wide awake, usually drinking coffee, and on the table are artifacts, are questions from different police departments about cases that we are working. In this particular case, we were working a supposed suicide by shotgun, and it turned out to be a homicide. We were sent the shotgun itself and an item of clothing that the victim had worn. Now you'll notice that most of the squad members you see here are male. That's because the squad is 90% male. This is a squad report. This would be sent back to the police department consulting with each person's report, and if they are able to give an ideogram or a sketch, that is included in the report. So sometimes you will find the same things happening. You want to draw something, and if you do, this is encouraged. Okay, psychic detectives are trained the same way as police detectives and reporters. All journalists learn to use those words. We have a code word. It's Niwati, which is the last letter in each one of those questions. And if you can remember Niwati, you will never leave out one of the important questions. Through working in a group, we develop more information. There's a lot of question about this. Can a group do a better job than one person? The way we see it, every person in the group may contribute his own work, and then we do a correlation. Some people are better on one thing than another. Some people are better on things that you see. Some people are better on things that you hear. Some people are better on things that you smell. And when you get together a report, it includes all of those things, because remote viewing is not just seeing, it's also feeling, hearing, smell, whatever happens to come is put down. Now, I myself am primarily visual. I see. This gentleman here is an individual who feels that he almost hears it in his ear. But we have discovered something about that. People who think that they hear the information are people who learn better from hearing than from reading. How many of you here learn better by what you're told than what you read? Okay, you may actually feel that you're hearing this information. You're not, but your brain processes it in that way. Retrocognition, to be able to see the past. Wouldn't we all like to do that? Yes, well, you can. Remote viewing is your avenue. Much of our work is in working for research people in the field of archaeology. And we're doing a new project in dinosaurs. You see them alive, so you can describe them perfectly. How they lived, what they did, what they ate. Story of the Psi Squad is usually one of murder. We don't commit them, we solve them. But from the beginning, rather than being called in on cases of missing persons, we ended up being called in on cases of already existing homicide in order to be able to tell the police how that homicide occurred. This is a school textbook which is written about psychic detectives, and it features an entire sequence of several of the cases of the United States Psi Squad. It was developed for our 7th, 8th, and 9th grade students. Again, the gentlemen who have just completed a case successfully, and you can see from their faces that they're relieved. But this is the way the squad works. You don't see any robes, crystal balls, burning candles, or any other unusual item. You work in a fully conscious state, and you put down everything that you're remote viewing. Come on in and sit down. There's a couple chairs up toward the front here. Now, the sketch part. An ideograph can be a simple motion, it can be just a scrawl, or it can be as complex as this. When in remote viewing training, you see something that looks like a shape, you just put down the way you see it. Now, obviously, this is a rectangle on end with cross lines. We'd say, oh, that looks like a kite, but it might not have any reference at all to a kite. But when you find out what the target was, it'll be obvious why it looked like a kite. Police detectives consult us all the time. We do not volunteer. They come to us to ask. We do not do high-profile cases unless we're asked to do them by the police. We're a licensed detective bureau. I am a licensed private investigator. We are a Missouri state licensed psychic detective agency, private detective agency. We do not charge. All of our work is done for free. This was our first homicide case. This was a missing person case, but it was determined that she was dead, and we set forth ourselves to find the body. We didn't realize that we were supposed to tell the police where to look. We went out and found it ourselves. And as you can see, it ended up on the front pages. That this is what launched us as an official body recovery squad. This is the part of the article that was at the bottom of the other page that you saw. A grim discovery in the weeds. When they found the body, they decided to give us full credit for having found the location. This we're going to come back to, because I'm going to present this case in a little more detail. This was our first serial killer case. And it was an extremely interesting case. A 14-year-old girl who had a block to walk going home from school and never made it to her house. And they were totally baffled. So they sent us a photograph and a jacket. And we'll come back to that later, and we'll talk about what we got from that. This is how she was found, exactly where we told them that she would be. And this is a police photograph, as you can tell, before the body was recovered. A wristwatch found on the body of a murdered man, discovered and floating in a river in Omaha, Nebraska. They sent it to us to find out why he ended up in that water, dead. Another one of our cases involved a young man flung like that outside of a highway. Again, the squad, now as you'll notice, we do have some women here, so it'll make you girls feel a little better. Each one of them is working on a different case at the same time. Now, somebody always says, well, when you work in a group, what about telepathy? We don't find that a problem, because when you are trained, you're controlling your ability. And you could be sitting on a hot stove with popcorn going off, and you would be concentrating on what you're doing. So if the person next to you is working on a totally different case, it doesn't matter. This was a rather interesting case. An individual was found cut to death with his own saw. Obviously, he wasn't that bad a fumbler, so the question was how that occurred. So they sent us the saw. And as I said, we are an official body. This is the only problem we've ever discovered as psychic detectives. We're not allowed to testify on the stand, although they can ask for a mistrial because we were used in solving the case. In this particular case, the police were able to say they didn't solve the case, they didn't catch you, all they did was find the body. And so it was denied, no mistrial. Working in the laboratory with scientists is also a part of what we do. Archaeologists are some of them. The job depends on the scientist who does request it. We don't charge them either. This was our first piece of archaeological work, and it was done from a tooth which was sent to us in a box. The doctor who sent it to us didn't tell us whether it was a human tooth or an animal tooth. So we had to first determine what kind of tooth it was, and then to reconstruct the individual who had originally worn the tooth. He was most surprised because we were able to tell him how the man had died from a blow to the skull, and the skull was found with a depressed skull fracture. This is an artist's conception of what it's like to work with the police in the way that we do, and it's pretty accurate except for the water cooler. This is some of our more recent work. These are points which were sent to us from an archaeological site in Illinois called Cahokia Mounds. It is America's only earth pyramid. In fact, it's North America's only pyramid. And it's an extremely complex and exciting site. These points were dug up there. This is what it must have looked like about 2,000 years ago. And you note the large pyramids. So it's an extremely complex piece of work. And what we're working on right now is under that large pyramid, scientists hit stone. Now, what is stone doing in the middle of a mud pyramid, an earth pyramid? They were digging to put in a drain system in that pyramid so that it wouldn't weather down any further. And they hit stone at a certain level. And so we're involved with finding out what's under that pyramid. Lynn, if you'd like to join in on that, we'd be glad for the input. This gentleman is doing a squad correlation, putting everybody's results into one. This ability should be, and always should be, tested against fields where you can get accuracy in your answers, your feedback. If you don't get good feedback, you wasted your time. So if you're working with an unknown, try to always work with something where you're going to be able to be proven right or wrong. One of the ways that we do that is with Wall Street, because you can instantly get feedback by opening the daily paper or turning on the news. We work for archaeologists. They have to tell us whether we were right or wrong or how close we were. But testing is fine, but feedback is vital. The future. Did it happen already? Has it happened? Are we living in a time that is three, past, present, and future all at once? I believe that we are. Because using remote viewing, you could go into tomorrow, 1,000 years ago, or 1,000 years in the future. There are no barriers. This is possible because our conception of time as a railroad track leading from one place to another is incorrect. We see time more closely as a circle, the way the ancients drew it. And you can go anywhere you want on the perimeter of that circle. All time is one. This is one of the things that I did as an experiment. A man called me and said he was a businessman. Would I answer a question for him? I said, just bring it over to my office Saturday, but seal it up in an envelope because I don't want to know what your question is. By handling that item, which was just a simple question written on a piece of paper, he became a multimillionaire in coffee futures, and he gave me a $60,000 commission. There you see the gentleman himself from Harlingen, Texas. And there you see the house. I received a house and 2 gold contracts and some other very nice things to have for doing one remote view. This is a stock contest. In Dr. Dean Radin's book, you will find the information on this particular contest on page 201 in his book, The Conscious Universe. He stopped at the middle of the year. At the end of the year, it was even higher than 17%. But you can see the skepticism in the question. Is she psychic or is she lucky? Well, take a look at the house I'm living in. Timing is the most important thing in working with prediction. It's the hardest thing to do. You can know something is going to happen, but you don't know when. When I did the original coffee forecast, the man drove me crazy for a year asking me, when will this happen? And I couldn't tell him. It's like being blind. So I knew that I had to get some way of telling when something would occur. And just about that time, a man called me from New York, and he said, I put out a newsletter called Financial Foresight. Would you like to do some work for me? What I want you to do is predict the stock market for the year ahead, the whole year. Well, I guess almost anybody else would have said no. But because of this question, I said yes. And I did that for 9 years. And he has attested to 90% accuracy over that 9-year period. So you can do it. This is Omni. It was picked up by Omni when I did that. And you can see I'm a little surprised that when the photograph actually went off. And I was even more surprised when it showed up on CBS radio the following day. Charlie Osgood did a special on it. This is how it's done. Targets that you cannot see. Each envelope contains the name of a stock. You never know what you're working on. You have to shield yourself from that. Because if you knew the stock was Microsoft, you might say, oh gosh, Microsoft. So by concealing the target, you don't know which one of those envelopes actually would be Microsoft. So you work all 4. And many times I've found that one of those is not the one I had in mind at all, but it gives such a beautiful graph in my head that I'll buy that one instead. Because I've trained myself to see mental graphs. So have many of my students. Dog bite. You want to reverse? So concealing your target is a good idea. That's the whole idea behind the numbers that the military used in the Stargate program as well, isn't it, Lynn? Conceal the target as much as you can. So even though you might know that it's a stock, that doesn't tell you anything. But by setting up a multiple target selection, then that does. You'll pardon the tech prob. Yes?
So do you visualize 4 different graphs, or just one?
Each one a graph, each envelope. Yes. Okay. Yeah. If you're working 4 envelopes or 6, you mentally get your graph and then you just draw it on the envelope. And then when you're done, you can look at the 4 graphs and determine whether or not you like one of those. And if you do, put your money where your mouth is, but don't do it until you have practiced for a while. Make sure, because you don't want wishful thinking. Now, remember what I said? You want targets with good feedback. So what you want to do is do this long enough to test your feedback and make sure that you are accurate, that your graph is accurate as far as how the movements are going to be. I usually ask for 6 months. I will draw a 6-month graph. You can do a much longer period, but 6 months will work. I have been asked whether you could do it daily. Of course. The question is what's important. Anybody else have a question on that one? It's like being an ambulance tech or a nurse in critical care unit. I mean, you cannot become involved with your target. You can't marry your target, and you can't get involved with your target. And especially if it's murder. Many people believe that they couldn't handle an item like that. And that's one reason, I suppose, that we have more men in the group than we do women. They seem to be able to handle that kind of job a little more easily. What's the problem, guys? Yes. They wouldn't ask us if they didn't. On the first case that you saw, we were able to go out on foot and find the body. So, I mean, what could they do with that? Frequently, they'll call us right after something happens. They don't wait until 6 months later. Thank God. Yes. You just allow it to flow out. Actually, you don't pick up any energy when you're just looking at it. In training phases where we use a hard object, then you do. You get up and wash your hands. You're clear. But you go from the hard object to the straight remote view, the pure. Yes. We were asked whether we took cases where there were police cover-ups involved. Only if we are asked to by other police, and we have been. I'll give you an example. In one case, every time the department was going out to do a drug hit, the place was clean as a baby's front teeth. And they couldn't figure out what was going on there. So the chief of police called me very late one night, and he, in a very low voice, he said, we have a problem, and that's what it was. And I saw a man, described him. He was sitting in front of a piece of equipment, which I also described, and the chief said, "Oh my God, that's Charlie." The dispatcher. So Charlie went to jail, and our stock went up. So, okay. This is an example that we do of PK. We can do an experiment with this particular thing, which will show you how much energy you actually have and how much you can control. This is a Crookes radiometer. It responds to light. Those little flags go whirling round and round, and you can stop them by thinking at them. We have in this room an individual who is ready to demonstrate that anytime you want. And it's not even me. This is how it's done. You learn to stop it with your fingertips and eventually with your mind. So the uses of energy are many. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go into a couple specific cases with sessions. So we're going to go back to slide 46. Our 45 is okay, and we're going to put the lights back up. Now, anybody got any questions while we're going through that? Yes. In the back. We train them with the kind of cases they will be handling from the very first day.
So they're conditioned to deal with emotionally challenging targets different than what the average population does?
Yes. Yes. Very seldom do we have somebody who can't handle that kind of work after their training. Yes. The question is, will this stock go up in the next 6 months? Will this stock go up, what is today, the 16th? Okay, will this stock go up by the 16th of 6 months from now? That's the question. And the graph, when you get it, you just draw it. But like I say, don't buy it until you know you're doing it right, yes.
Can you use pictures sent over the internet or computer?
Very difficult. It can be done, yes. I won't say you can't. But the best, if you're going to work with photographs at all, let me advise you right now, the best photograph to use for remote viewing is Polaroid. Polaroid. Because the camera was in close proximity to the target. And some of the energy from the target is captured on the film. That's how a Polaroid works. All right? So if you go through magazines, newspapers, internet, downloads, you're getting generations away from the target itself. Yes. It holds it excellently. When the police call us and they have photographs available, we always ask, A, are they Polaroids? If not, we frequently ask if they will send us some Polaroids. And sometimes they'll go out and take extra shots for us. Okay, back to 45. All right.
You want 45?
Yeah, where are you?
This is on 46.
Well, that's all right. No, that's all right. We'll just go. All right. In this particular case, our very first, we were given a nightgown and a powder puff that belonged to this individual before she disappeared. By holding the nightgown and the powder puff, we were able to determine that she was dead, she was still in the St. Louis area, and we had an idea of where she might be. So we got in the car and went there, and it was the right place, as you saw. Now, this case. Chief Barry Beal of Belleville, Illinois, called my office one day and he said, last night we lost a kid from the high school. And she's 14 years old. Her parents are frantic. So I told him, can you get me something that she wore and a picture of the girl? And he said, I'll have a detective at your office in an hour. Detective Jack Dingies came in. He had her jacket that she hadn't worn that night and a photo. I was immediately able to tell him that she was dead. She'd been strangled, raped, and thrown into a ravine. Then they wanted to know where the ravine was. So he went back to the office at my request and brought a utility company map. Anybody here know what a utility company map is? Okay, the scale is enormous. Like one county would be the size of this whole room, not like the maps that you ordinarily use. If you're looking for something specific, whether it's body or whether it's gold or your lost bracelet or whatever it happens to be that you're looking for, if you're looking in a big area, a utility company map is the best to use. So I followed the route out of town mentally, and I came to a place between two little towns south of Belleville. One was Millstadt, and the other was Floraville. And the line went right through Millstadt and right in between the two towns and stopped. So I made an X on the map and gave it to the policeman. And that is exactly where this child was found, as you see. Now, the interesting thing is that this is a ravine. You can't really tell that from the photo. But it's a ravine in a farm field in between Millstadt and Floraville, Illinois. And that is where she was found. So about 2 hours later, the police sent for me to come over to that ravine, sit in it, and see what else I could come up with. At that time, I was able to see the car, and that it was raining at the time that she had died. The time that I got was 11:51 p.m., and I could see rain on the car windows. Now, in checking the weather report for that day, rain was not listed. So I called the United States Weather Bureau, gave them the exact place and the exact time, and they verified that it had showered in that exact area between 11:50 and 12 o'clock that night. So the rain on the windshield was correct, and it was very important. Okay, can we have the lights back up? I have with me the initial session done on that case, and unfortunately wasn't able to get it made into a slide in time. over here, you'll see what we talk about as sketches, ideographs, anything that I saw, like car bumper. In this particular case, saw a male face, and it's a man with a very thin face, and he has Elvis Presley sideburns, very outstandingly so. You don't see that very often, Elvis Presley sideburns. Shortly after this, another girl was killed, and we knew it was the same man. And I told the chief he'll be caught in the commission of the next one, the same type of case. About 2 weeks later, he attempted to abduct a young woman out of a laundromat, and she broke free, was able to describe the car, and they picked him up for attempted kidnapping. When they had him in jail, somebody said, "Oh my God, look at those sideburns." And so they started questioning about Elizabeth West. And he finally admitted that he had indeed killed Elizabeth West and Ruth Janney, and had beaten to death an older woman even previously to that. So he was our first serial killer case, and we are happy to report to you that he is still in jail. If anybody would like to look at that session sheet, it's unfortunate I wasn't able to get a slide made of that, but I did bring it with me. This is some of the newspaper coverage that appeared in Belleville at the time. And on the other side, you find the map on which I drew the X. That was included in the coverage. But the gentleman very, very unusually made a mistake. He tried to grab one too many girls. Here is his picture. See the sideburns? And on the other side is a story about calling in psychics in police cases. But he was jailed for a first-degree homicide in that case. And if he ever attempts to get free, they will start prosecuting him for the second girl he killed. Now, I know you all want to hear about the curse. Do you want to hear about some more criminal cases, or do you want to skip right to the curse? Because I don't want to go over my time too much. Curse? Okay, all right. Last August 14th, CNN carried the news that it was possible that a Russian submarine was missing in the Barents Sea. It was on war game maneuvers, and they kind of allowed that there might have been some type problem with that ship. And by the evening of the 15th, they were admitting that it was down, it was missing. And at that time, I took it on as a case because our job is to preserve life where possible. The question here was, if the sub is down, are living men on it and to be saved? Is there anybody to save? Is there any use in looking for the ship? So on that night, I did my first remote view, and it showed that there had been an interior explosion of a propeller-driven torpedo with an unusual warhead, and it had exploded other torpedoes near it. The whole front of the ship blew out. Now, I had gone back in time to see that, but I was interested in whether anybody was alive then. So I had to go through the entire length of the ship and found on the 4th story. Did you know submarines have 4 stories? I didn't. On the 4th story, there were at least 24 living men, and they were scared stiff. All the officers were dead, and they were helpless. They didn't know what to do. For some reason, they couldn't get the hatch open to get out. So I called the next morning at dawn. I sent an email out to the rest of the group, and I said, I didn't tell them anything other than we're working on the Kursk and concentrate on personnel. That's the target, personnel. And the answers started coming back right away. The first one that came in was from our newest member, John, in Canada. John, will you hold up a hand? That was his first squad case, and he came in like gangbusters. He repeated almost everything that I had gotten in his remote view. It looked almost exactly like mine, other than that I saw green lights somehow under the water, and he got it as a green glow, a ooze, or how did you describe it? an ooze. We still don't know what that was. So the rest of the squad reports started coming in on email. And what I did was I said, let's send these all to the webmaster so he can collect as we go. And I called my webmaster on the email and I said, you're going to be getting some reports on this missing submarine and just store them, get them all together. Because if these people are alive on there, they have to be gotten out. Somebody's got to do something. And then I called some sources that I have, because we've done work for government agencies in the past, and I put the information through the chain as high as I could go. And then the Russians decided they didn't want any help from our side. But by then we were socked into it, and we kept remote viewing the submarine every day and seeing fewer and fewer men still alive. Finally, there were only 2, and on the, I believe it was the 19th, they were all dead, everyone. Going a little ahead in future, I could see the divers coming down to the ship and having no trouble getting through those hatches. They were not jammed. All the lies about that submarine were wrong. The hatches weren't jammed at all. They had no trouble getting in there. And at that point, we quit our remote view entirely because everybody was dead. Our job was over. I mean, we're not grave diggers. We were trying to save lives. So this particular job involved 11 members of the Psi Squad, and each one of their reports in email form are on our website. If you'd like to read everybody's work on the Kursk and the dates they were done, so that there's no question about this, all you do is go to www.usscisquad.com, and it's all laid out for you. I brought copies along for if you would care to look at those. As you'll see that our last remote view, the final closing of the coffin, so to speak, was on the 20th. By then, everybody was dead, and our job was completed. Now, why did we do this? We were not asked to do the Kursk. Some of my contacts found out we were doing the Kursk. They were very happy to hear that, but at the same time, we feel as humans, as normal people, that our job shouldn't be just homicide. But if there's life to be saved, this is our job. We previously were asked to find a missing child that was alive, and we located that child. And we could not get that child away from where he was because it was a 50-cent a night flop house. The police couldn't get a warrant to get in there, and we had to wait until the child was killed the following day. But ever since then, we've had a dedication to finding out whether people are still alive and can be saved. Unfortunately, most of our cases are not. Any questions? The police work as police. I work as a journalist. Everybody is working, and they support themselves. We don't have a treasury. We don't have a slush fund. We consider what we do public service. You don't charge for public service. So, yes. They have to pass criterions of the training procedures themselves involve actual cases. And if you can come through the training and do good work, then you're a candidate for the squad. We have associate members and we have full members, yes.
Have you done any work on the Ramsey case?
I haven't been asked to. We will never touch a high-profile case unless we are requested by the police, not by the inquirer. Yes. I can't talk about that. Sorry. Ongoing cases that aren't closed are never talked about. There were some questions over here. Yes. We're never not able to produce some useful tips. We've never had a case that we weren't able to give help on.